welcome. Let's try and get that camera right. What's those problems here? Anyway, and welcome to another music review and another in my series focusing on genres in 1970. And this one is going to be looking at prog rock, or as I used to call it, progressive rock. There are lots of prog fans out there, and most of them will be familiar with this collection of albums. But nevertheless, I've heard my perspective on it, so I'm going to do probably 3 or 4 from 1970, and let's get started. The first one, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. A bit of background. Keith Emerson and Greg Lake got together in December 1969 when Emerson's band The Nice and Lake's band King Crimson were on the same bill at a series of concerts at the Fillmore West in San Francisco. And as a result, they decided that they were going to form a new group, but they didn't have a drummer. They tried to get Mitch Mitchell, but he appeared to be unavailable, and then following discussions with Emerson's manager, Tony Stratton Smith, he suggested that they approach Carl Palmer, who was the drummer with Atomic Rooster, and he'd previously been involved in the short-lived Crazy World of Arthur Brown. He initially wasn't that keen, feeling a sense of loyalty to Rooster, but eventually agreed to join the two of them. And then their second appearance on the 29th of August in 1970, get it right, proved to be the crucial input into deciding that this group were going right to the top. Now, that event on the 29th of August, some of you might remember or at least know, was the Isle of Wight Pop Festival, a very famous event in music history. And there was about 600,000 people there. Unfortunately, I wasn't them. The crowd that day, without me, witnessed the firing of cannons by Emerson at the end of their Pictures at the Exhibition piece. Anyway, they then went into the studio. Lake was the producer, and they put together their first album. And it was a pretty amazing piece of work, to say the least. Just a little bit on the instrumentation on that album. Emerson played the Hammond organ, piano, clavinet, pipe organ, and the modular Moog synthesizer. Greg Lake, vocals, bass, acoustic and electric guitars, and Palmer was on the drums and the percussion. So, let's go into this album. It was very much an innovative new development, and as I say, we classified it as prog rock. Well, it was a lively, ambitious debut, as I suggested. It was made up really of a combination of keyboard-dominated instrumentals and romantic ballads of sorts, and it showcased all 3 members' very daunting and versatile talents. So let's get to the details, and I'm not going to do thorough on this, just quick dabs into each track. We got started with the, it came out like a cannon really, The Barbarian. Heavily takes hold of your senses, and Emerson grips you with a montage of synthesizers and keyboards, and the electronic drum also swamps you from Palmer before we filter into the classical piano, and then it recycles into the intro, and it's based apparently on a classical piece by one Bartok, who I have to confess I'm not familiar with. Next up was the track Take a Pebble, and a bit of a contrast really from the off. Very sort of King Crimson-like, an inspired ballad with Greg's voice soothing us all. It's a beautifully crafted piece of music, but after a few minutes, Emerson's piano replaces the sort of Fripp-style guitar on King Crimson early albums, and the medieval feel also takes hold, with a prelude to a knees-up folk-sounding stomp, and then the piano returns and takes us on a spacious journey to Nirvana. It's almost avant-garde jazz, and 12 minutes later it's all over. The Knife Edge is next up. It's got a nice hook, enables the piece to jump backwards and forwards from Keith's full keyboards and Greg's aggressive vocals. It's based again on classical movement courtesy of Bach and Janacek. There are electronic drums again by Palmer and a jarring organ dissonance with solos to boot. After that extremely powerful side one, the reverse side, has to be said, is a little weaker. It starts off with a composition written by Emerson called The Three Fates, and it's in three pieces and based on the Greek legend of the Moirae. That's three women that determined one's destiny, and their names are Clotho, Lachesis and Atropis. Well, this represented the cycle of life, essentially birth, life and death, and the drawn-out Clotho starts us off with pipe cathedral organ, and then a short piano piece that features Baroque and jazz influences, and then it ends with a grand piano arpeggio. It's pretty spellbinding, and close your eyes when you're listening, and there's an explosive finale. The second piece, I have to say, it is pretty drawn out and not very rememberable, but the final piece, Atropis, Emerson really ups the ante with his piano vamp, and the percussion from Palmer is quite improvisational. The whole piece is very improvisational, and it sort of plays on top of the whole feeling, and it goes on a bit, but basically the Three Fates. The last two tracks, I have to say, disappointed me. Tank, which is next up, is really a vehicle for a drum solo by Palmer. Never been a great fan of these self-indulgent pieces, but his dexterity is certainly notable, as is the electro-sounding effects. But it's basically only 4 minutes, which is basically a blessing, really. And then Lucky Man, which takes us out. It's just an acoustic folk song. Apparently, Lake wrote this song when he was only 12 years old. And it's got lots of oohs and ahs in the harmonies. And there's a little lead guitar in there. Not much on this album, but you hear it on this one. And it's a sea shanty style melody. And then Emerson's Moog takes over as we go towards the fade out. So, what do I think of it? I've got to be in the right mood, to be honest. When I am in the right mood, I find it a very moving album, particularly side one. But there are long gaps between listens. The second choice on this first episode of Prog Rock 1970 is Benefit by Jethro Tull. This album, I think, really suffered from being between the two heavyweights that preceded and followed it, those being Stand Up, released in '69, an album that I have on my channel, a review that is, a brilliant album, and of course '71's Aqualung, which went to dizzying heights for the band. So Benefit is one of those albums that many people say, nice, but can't remember any of it. And I have to confess I was very much the same. But to provide material for this video, of course I've listened to it a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. The sound is definitely solidified around folk music, reducing those blues roots that we heard on This War Was, and also on Stand Up. The electric guitars carry the melodies more, and Anderson's lyrics are filled more with dense, seemingly profound imagery and statements. But it's a little bit less complex than Stand Up. But I'm now going to go through the track list, and again, as I say, I'm not going to do a full review, but you know what my short reviews are. They're usually very long. So we get started with You There to Help Me, and a nice acoustic guitar carries the melody, and then it's joined by Barr's electric instrument for the crescendos. The flute flows out from the intro, and the two instruments lock in for a bit of tit for tat, a common trend with Barr and Anderson. Quality on both of them, I would suggest. And I'm going to use this track to go through Jack Anderson's lyrics. So here we go. In days of peace, sweet smelling summer nights, of wine and song, dusty pavements burning feet. Why am I crying, I want to know? How can I smile and make it right? For 60 days and 80 nights, and not give in and lose the fight. I'm going back to the ones that I know, with whom I can be what I want to be. Just 1 week for the feeling to go, and with you there to help me. Then it probably will. I won't go down acting the same old play. Give 60 days for just one night. Don't think I'd make it, but then I might. With whom I can be what I want to be. Just 1 week for the feeling to go, and with you there to help me, then it probably will. Okay, I think I missed a line there. I am reading these lyrics, by the way. I haven't got the ability to memorise them all, so apologies if I've missed out on a crucial line. But anyway, that's the first song. On to the other tracks then. Nothing to Say, tracks 2. This is a bit more bluesy. The lyric emphasise this is how the sound comes across. Pleasant, but lacks a bit of a challenge. The tempo switches really from folk to rock melodies. It's only a couple of minutes. Alive and Well and Living In. It's a bit mundane with scatty flute and piano with acoustics that don't really mix very well. And then the next track, 4, Sun, and this is where Barr is featured. He alternates first rocky guitar solos, and then we get the medieval folk court jester piece from Anderson before it shoots back to rock again. And then we go on to the next track, which is for Michael Collins, Jeffrey and Me. Now this continues more of the sound from Sun. Folk enables Anderson's vocal to shine, and then the song recycles the rock guitar from Barr, and it continues flitting between the two contrasting sounds. Lacks a bit of cohesiveness, I felt, in the direction, but it's pleasant enough. To Cry You a Song, I felt this was a much stronger song on this album, more blues and rocky mix. The soloing mixes together neatly before we get lost on the freeform jazz style that is signalled really by Barr's playing on extended guitar bits. And Evan on keyboard, he develops the prog rock temptations. Then A Time for Everything, sparse flute pieces which improve on extra listening, but it doesn't really go anywhere, this song, to be honest. And then we have Inside. This is a great song with nice flute melodies, and Ian's vocals are more bassy, and the song is more cohesive with odd percussion excursions. Quirky vocals to be said at the end. And then we move on now to the last three songs. Playing Time, a flute-inspired jocular jaunty beat reflecting folk merriment, I thought. It's fine, but instantly forgettable. Rhythm section is tight, and bar is restrained. It thrills and collapses towards the end as it rambles on. Penultimate track is Society, You're a Woman. Some nice organ on the intro with the acoustic guitar. It's very folklore and dominated by Ian's vocals with the flute and the acoustic guitar in equal quantities. It's highly pleasant with some addictive piano. And then to the final track, A Time for Everything. Sorry, these are the bonus tracks that I listened to. A Time for Everything and Teacher. And I not much to comment about A Time for Everything, but Teacher I bought as a single way back, and I must admit it's a very pleasant listen to. It's got a tight rock beat with splinters of flute, and the keyboards drive a strong vocal from Ian, and there's a nice solo at the back end from Anderson and Barr collectively. So there we have it then. Benefit. I still don't think it really hits the high spots like the two before and after albums, but it is progressive rock of a sort, and by any other band who hadn't released Stand Up and weren't about to release Aqualung, it would be seen as a very fine piece of work. But for Tull, at this stage, it's just okay. So the third offering then on this Prog Rock episode 1 is Trespass by Genesis. Trespass was the second album by this band. A band, of course, formed at Charterhouse School, not far from where I was born, for the first part of my life, up until the age of 20. And Genesis at that time, of course, was Anthony Phillips on guitars, Peter Gabriel, Mike Rutherford on bass, and Tony Banks on drums. On keyboards, and the drummer name escapes me, and I haven't got it to hand on my notes. But this was the band before the crisis that emerged, which led to Phillips's departure and the arrival of Phil Collins and Steve Hackett. Okay, so let's get to Trespass. It has to be said that this album was featured very heavily at the time that I became a Genesis fan, and I was able to see them on a number of occasions at a local venue not far from Charterhouse School. It was a very small sort of room, really, that was attached to a hotel, and it was called the Mad Gin Mill Club at the Angel Hotel, and I had many memorable evenings there on a Sunday night, usually full of Newcastle Brown Ale, which was the staple diet at this venue. And back to Genesis, I saw them frequently and became obsessed with their finale song, The Knife, and I'll refer to that a little bit further down the road. But anyway, I'm going to now go through very briefly the tracks on Trespass. Opens up with Looking for Someone. It's 7 minutes, and it's very sparse at the beginning, with Gabriel's vocals dominating, but he meshes perfectly with the guitar and keyboard, and this, of course, is very much indicative of the style of music that was being put together. It established the Genesis sound, and we had rocky, fast tempo segments with softer, quieter folk style parts. The mellotron also became fashionable, and Phillips's guitar work quite significant on this track. It's basically about self-awareness and balancing comfort with a relationship of contentment. Then we moved on to White Mountain, and another lengthy piece, just under 7 minutes. It's a unique mythical prog rock tale with a swelling King Crimson-esque mellotron, tinkling keyboards and throbbing percussion. It's got a folk medieval feel to the sound. The acoustic guitar moulds in with the mellotron, flute and up-tempo organ, and the harmony is soothing, choir-like almost, and there's an impassioned lead vocal from Gabriel, and we witness the band developing the art of knitting the soft and fast sections together with a considerable amount of finesse. Lyrically, it's a vivid picture of nature in a tough environmental setting, and we see through the eyes of a wolf called Fang, and Gabriel unleashes a few historical metaphors and images to illustrate the story. Of a military aircraft overhead, let's move on to visions of angels. The organs and mellotrons are toned down to a piano here for the most part, and Gabriel does some of his most soulful and philosophical singing ever, to be honest. Some believe that when they die they really live. I believe that never is an end. A quick quote from the lyric there. Flute mellotron sound is heard throughout. It's got a religious sort of feel to the church-like sound, very moving. I think it's a sad tale of losing one's love too early and holding out hope of a reunion in the afterlife. And then to the track 4, which I think is an absolute standout. It's called Stagnation. It's got a folksy first section, classical guitar style and the keyboard mixed into a single sound that's very beautiful and memorable. Then the alternating sections of loud and quiet, start and stop, work well together. Dramatic drum rolls and off-key chaos that finally brings this 8-minute opus to an end. It has the feel of a sad end of a performance that just makes you want more. Banks has an eerie keyboard work on this, delicately uplifting, and the track was a big favourite on the live set, and I do recall this one. And the joyous midsection leading to Gabriel's soft poetic vocal as he leads the melodies to the beat. And it leads to the outro with his howling vocals to boot, and the final flute sound to wrap it up in a bow of tranquility. Dusk is the penultimate, and it sort of settles us all down really before the finale. Delicate and pretty musical patterns, subtle harmony, spiritually acoustic number about a new beginning, I think. It's very musical folk with more Gabriel flute. It's a message lyrically towards hope as each day yearns a new opportunity, irrespective of yesterday's grief or happiness. And so to the finale, The Knife. Now, The Knife goes down in Genesis folklore, really. It was the closing song on their set for a number of years, and it's a monstrously heavy number. Not heavy like something like Deep Purple or Black Sabbath, but it contains heavy elements. But the lyrics are also heavy, speaking words of uprisings and revolutions. And it's got a lengthy coda full of tempo changes and intelligently sequenced shifts from minor to major variations of the same musical themes. Here's a bit of the chorus. Some of you are going to die, martyrs, of course, to the freedom that I shall provide. Returns at the end over a spine-chilling major seventh flourish, and even the ensuing silence is deafening. Pounding keyboards, a furiously faced Gabriel vocal, the whole track sounds very spontaneous, and the progression between the various parts flow easily. Certainly it's the best playing by this band so far. A great guitar, great rhythm, a lovely solo, whooping bass from Rutherford, and Banks's organ holds all the rhythms together. There's crashing cymbals and a rock and roll type ending, which is totally chaotic before the final flourish from Phillips, almost as if he's saying his goodbye with some awesome guitar work. It's got great stereo separation as well on the production. Clearly a fan favourite for many years. A bit of a war cry, really, a message to rise up and crush the wicked. So that's it. Probably far too long, that very brief review. I do like Trespass. It's an album where you can see where they're moving on to. You can see the talent on view, but that talent hasn't actually reached its fulfillment. But it's a tremendous piece of work. Get to listen to it. It's Trespass by Genesis. I'm going to save some of the other big hitters on the Prog Rock Zoom in 1970 for the next video, but my last on this one is the debut album by Barclay James Harris, described by many as an unsung classic in a post-psychedelic pop era, produced by Norman Smith, who at the time was a very busy man. He was also involved in Pink Floyd's work, and it's an album that I find is very dated now. I'll back to Smith. Of course, he is the producer of the Whiter Shade of Pale, and also other elements of Procol Harum. But anyway, back to the Barclay James Harris. Yeah, I find it very dated. I have to say that the follow-up to this was an album that I fell in love with after seeing them live, and it was on my turntable on a very, very frequent basis. And I love that sort of orchestral rock sort of sound. Going through this album, I just found that many of the tracks were instantly forgettable. But let's go through them anyway, quickly, shall we? So first, Barclay James Harris. John Lee's on vocals, guitar and recorder. Les Holray plays vocals, bass guitar and cello. Stuart Woolley Wolstenholme was responsible for mellotron, keyboards and guitar and harmonica, and then Mel Pritchard was on drums. There was also a couple of people that guested on this album, particularly the Barclay James Harris Symphony Orchestra were involved in some of the tracks. So to the album. Well, it opens up with whiny guitar from James Litherland, who I mentioned in a video I did on Colosseum, and the track taking some time on seems to be endless. Well played, but instantly forgettable. Mother Dear is up next. It's symphonic prog rock with folk touches. There's a bit of recorder, a touch of cello, and a little bit of harmonica. Track 3, The Sun Will Never Shine. Soaring rock themes here with a classic feel, and soaring guitar solos as well. When the World Was Woken, another orchestral sound with the keyboards are very reminiscent of Gary Brooker from Procol Harum. And then we get track 5, Good Love Child. Again, much the same. The Iron Maiden, well, move on. The outstanding track I find is the final song, Dark Now My Sky. It was described by one critic as spellbinding, but I wouldn't go so far as that. There's apparently a spoken word intro by one Peter Gabriel. Lee's guitar is a highlight here. Repeated spiralling solos alongside the orchestral symphonic elements, with the keyboards and piano adding to the depth of sound. It has a spiritual feel to it, heavenly even, with some choir-like harmonies. It's impressive enough, and I'm sure back in 1970 when I saw them live, I loved it to bits. My love has waned somewhat. But for lovers of this symphonic rock, I'm sure you will take to it like a duck to water. Anyway, that concludes this review of Barclay James' Harvest, and it also completes the first episode of Prog Rock on my deep dive into the 1970s. Comments, please, and I hope you enjoyed it.